Epic talked to us and said, "Hey guys, we really like what you're doing, but we want you to stop doing it right now, and all of you go home because when you come back, you're going to make a mobile game." And we were really upset. Everyone, nobody was happy about having to make a mobile game.
All right, if everybody's ready, we can get started. Just as general introductions, I'm Happy Studios. I'm just like a YouTuber who covers Infinity Blade after its removal. My co-host is the Archivist. He's basically an archivist for everything to do with chair entertainment. He's got probably the biggest merchandise collection that anybody has ever seen related to chair. And you're Michael Lowe, so I mean, if you'd like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you've done, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. I'm Michael Lowe. I joined Chair Entertainment in October of 2005. They had started up that summer. There was about, I think, 8 of them. And I was the first person to come on after the original group. I had previously, with another partner, had a motion capture company that I had worked with the principals of those guys before at their previous company when they made Advent Rising. And as things were working out, they bought my company basically, and I went to work for them doing the motion capture for Chair in 2005. And I stayed with them until just last end of 2022. So,
Well, that's awesome. How did you get started in the gaming industry?
well, it's a long, convoluted story. I'm a little older than most of the guys I worked with, and I've had late in life gone back to school to get a music degree, and while working on that, my brother-in-law and good friend, he was working in animation, computer animation, and I was interested in gaming. I wasn't much of a gamer, but and talking, we thought we could make a production company, and I could write some music, and we could make some children's videos, and what we need to do is buy a little equipment, and so we bought a STT motion capture system. We got a business loan and did that, and never wrote any music, never made any kids videos. We just tried to stay alive. We ended up doing a few different projects, but the biggest ones were working for video games. The company Glyphix was here locally, and they were working on Advent Rising, so we did motion capture for them. And then after that, they put us in touch with a studio out of Austin. I can't even remember their name, but we worked on Blood Rain 2. We did the in-game motion capture for that. And then shortly after that, their company kind of folded up and ours kind of dried up. And I contacted Donald Mustard, who I got to know real well working on Advent. And we worked it out and came together and started doing animation for them. The team was amazingly talented team, and most of them had graduated from the BYU animation program, but oddly enough, none of them really did animation. They did things related to it. So once I got up and running, got the motion capture going, we had a regular project going. It took a long time to settle on what we were going to do. The original plan when I came in was they were working on a project we called Empire, which was going to be a big AAA game. We're going to build this gigantic studio, and it never came to fruition. We couldn't get a publisher that would believe that we could get that going. And so the first one we really settled on after I'd been there quite a few months and things started to get nervous was a project called Undertow, which ended up getting picked up by Microsoft for Xbox Live Arcade, and they actually paid us full for it up front.
Wow.
I don't know if you remember Undertow.
We actually do, yeah. The archivist would like to come into this conversation.
Sure, please do.
Yeah, thank you again for speaking with us, Mr. Lowe. Yeah, it's really cool to hear about your early history there. We have your like Moby Games profile with all your credits pulled up here, and it only starts there under. So it's really cool to hear about how you actually worked with the team on Advent Rising. I know that most of the early chair members were involved in that title.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as Undertow goes, it's really cool reading archived articles about the size limitation for Xbox Live Arcade at the time, which was 50 megabytes, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Kind of curious, what was the biggest challenge the Undertow size limitation posed for you in your role?
Well, so if you remember Undertow, it actually has cutscenes, which for a 50 megabyte game, that's crazy, right?
Oh, yeah.
But we were able to, we only had one programmer, Jeremy Mustard. So the Mustard brothers, who had kind of come up with the game. And Jeremy did all the programming on that. And I don't know how he compressed and then compressed the compressions to compress again to get things into 50. But we still got cutscenes in. And I remember when it came out that we got a lot of flack. How come, you have audio for your cutscenes, but you're not doing any facial animation? You're hiding their faces when they talk. Because with 50 megabytes, we could barely get the animation that we did. So that was my biggest thing. First of all, my biggest thing is I was doing, for that game, I did pretty much all the animations by hand, and I had no training in it at the time. And so I just kind of figured it out on the fly while all these other guys were working like crazy doing everything else. So they were great artists. They made great stuff. They weren't great at rigging. And so we kind of figured the rigging out together. And that was my first foray into animation. And so if you look at those cutscenes, they might be a little janky. But yeah, getting cutscenes in, getting them animated, and learning Maya while I was doing it.
Yeah, they're certainly an achievement for that title.
We had that game done probably for 5 months, just waiting for Microsoft to give us, there were all these little milestones. I can't even remember what we used to call them, that we just had to tick. And the one thing that they wanted more than anything is they wanted a big multiplayer game so that you can play 8-on-8 in that game, 16 players in Undertow. And they really wanted that for an XBLA game. And if you play that way, the game is actually even more fun. But it's just not very practical. Not very many people ever found an 8 versus 8 team, to play.
All right. So thank you for telling us about that. So Shadow Complex, we have a question on here about that.
Okay.
So Epic veteran Cliff Belinsky worked with Chair on a number of projects, starting with Shadow Complex after the acquisition. Can you speak on what insights or recommendations he gave?
Well, he's the one who came up with the name. He's also the one who came up with Infinity Blade's name. We had other names that we liked better. I actually don't even remember what we called Shadow Complex before, but then Cliff came in and said, no, we're going to call it Shadow Complex. And we all kind of thought, I guess it kind of makes sense. I don't know.
Dad, you were supposed to call it Empire. Remember?
Well, Empire was the project that it was born from. We were working with Orson Scott Card for the Empire project. And he was writing, he wrote a novel, actually a couple of them, with the Empire IP that never really came to fruition. So this was kind of a side thing from Empire. Empire was that big AAA game that we wanted to do. And once again, it was Donald and Jeremy, the Mustard brothers, who kind of came up with the whole Empire thing. And just kind of like Undertow, this came out of desperation. We'd gotten our money from Undertow from Microsoft, and that was starting to run out really quick. And so we just tore into this, and I can tell you a little bit about the development of it if you'd like.
Yeah, for sure.
So, as you know, we'd looked at Metroid and wanted to do something, like Metroid, but a little more realistic and in that Empire vein. And so we did the whole project. You've probably heard this story, but we did the whole project on paper before we put it on into digital. So we had big sheets of map plotting paper that we print out. We knew the restrictions of the game and what power-ups you get at what point. And I remember all of us working in Illustrator, putting maps together, and then we meet once or twice a week with what we built, and then we kind of sewed the different parts together. So if you go to the chair, well, it's kind of closed up now, but I bet it's still hanging on the wall. There's a big, like 4 foot by 8 foot map of all of Shadow Complex there. And I can go in and look at the different parts that I drew up. There's a good portion of the beginning that I did, and was my part of the maze. And each of the, I think there was 9 of us at that time, maybe 10, did a little portion of it. We put it together. And I have to say, I do like, of the 3 main chair projects I worked on, Shadow Complex is my favorite. It's not only my favorite to play, but it's also my favorite that we built. It was a really fun, creative time. We were running up against the clock. We were running out of money. We were taking pay cuts, and it was a blast. So,
wow, that's incredible. So like tracing all of this to like Infinity Blade, because I mean, the port is how your daughter reached out to us. So
by the way, it's great. I played the second Bloodline on it yesterday, so it's great. It's a little harder with the mouse, but I remember playing it with the mouse a lot before we got it on there. But yeah.
So one of our questions is like, so from what you've said before, it kind of sounds like you guys were like a small knit unit. Like, how connected were the different parts of Chair when you were making these games? Like, you got the animation department, like people who were making the story, and the people who were like programming the game itself. Like, how connected is all of that?
It's extremely connected. Now, once again, I'm only speaking for myself, but we had, like I said, by the time we did Shadow Complex, we were probably, I think there was 9 of us, and I think maybe 1 or 2 of those guys, one was just Ryan Holmes who was our business guy. He's the guy who he kind of ran the company and got the money for the company, and he was the big honcho, but he didn't do a lot of game development. And so the way we always described it is everybody wears a lot of hats. Everybody helped everybody on everything. And a lot of guys did many things. The most amazing thing about Undertow was Jeremy was our only programmer. But by the time we got to Infinity Blade, we also we had Josh Anderson and Scott Bowen, and they were really good programmers. And so, as you know, it takes a lot when you're making a game like that, and having those guys really hitting it hard and a lot of extra hours. That was great. But I don't know if you know the story about how Infinity Blade came to be.
Okay. So, well, we know that Steve Jobs and Donald Mustard, like generally speaking, UE3 for iOS, and just wanted to showcase what mobile phones were capable of. That's what we know.
Well, yeah. So that happened, but we had after Shadow Complex became a hit. Our next project, we went to make sequel for Shadow Complex 2, and we worked for about a year on Shadow Complex 2. In fact, we got it to the point where it was actually playable. We had about a year left of development on it, getting all the assets and programming done, and it was looking really good. It was going to be fun, and we got a call. We got a Skype call. Tim and a couple other guys from the head office at Epic talked to us and said, "Hey guys, we really like what you're doing, but we want you to stop doing it right now, and all of you go home, because when you come back, you're going to make a mobile game." And we were really upset. Nobody was happy about having to make a mobile game, because we had gone a whole year and it was looking good. We'd hired, it had a bigger team. I was no longer the animator. We'd hired a guy from Disney, and he was the head animator, and I was just doing mostly MoCap. Although for Shadow Complex 2, I did a lot of hand animation. I did hand animation for all the Infinity Blades, but not nearly as much as I just cleaned up MoCap and dealt with the assets. I snuck a lot of my own stuff in there that Scott didn't know about, but don't tell him. But yeah, so we were not happy about having to do in Infinity Blade. So we came back the next day and we had about a week of brainstorming. And I don't remember who came up with the idea for it. It was probably Donald or Jeremy, or more likely both of them together. But the biggest thing, when you make video games, the secret sauce is in the controls. If you can make the controls feel like you're in control of things, that's what makes a really good game. And here we are with this iPhone, and the only thing you can do is run your finger across it. And it was brilliant because the sword fighting controls ended up being perfect for that. And so it was kind of just serendipity that we came up with that mechanic. And the first things we did for Infinity Blade, we used assets from Shadow Complex 2. We had a couple months where we had assets from Shadow Complex 2 in there trying to get it going, because we had a hard deadline. It was really, I think we did it in 4 months, the first Infinity Blade.
Wow. That's a great story, and everyone is going to love to hear that. So optimization, and just like, how did you get this thing to run on, like, I believe at the time, an iPhone 3GS? Like, what were the extra steps you guys had to take to make it functional for a phone?
Well, okay, I'm a MoCap guy, an animation guy. I am not the guy to ask about this.
Okay.
If you can get hold of Jeremy Mustard, he could really, or Josh Anderson, or possibly Scott Bowen, those guys could really tell you about that. But like I had said with Undertow, Jeremy was amazing at being able to get things to run with not a lot of room. And, and this is a new platform, but Jeremy was really amazing at getting these things on.
Okay.
I can't say more than that.
So when it came to animations, you could do like whatever you wanted. You could go as far as you needed, and they had no issues with that in terms of optimization and stuff.
Oh no, we just like in every game, you're given your limits.
Okay.
And it's been a long time, but we wanted it to look better than anything else that was out there at the time, and we had really good artists. Bert Lewis was our character artist, and although a lot of guys wore different hats, there's probably some other characters that were drawn by some other guys, but Bert made these really fun fantasy type characters, and we had silly names for them. I can't even remember them, but not what you call them in the game, and which kind of got confusing at some time because when you're in a meeting and we're talking about anus face, and it would like, which one was that guy? And so yeah, we had all these names that we always used for them, and then when we finally published the game, we had to come out with real names. So
yeah, Sergeant Pinkerington.
yes,
That's what we heard.
Yeah, Sergeant
that
Pinkleton.
was Pinkleton. That was yes, and we had some funny stuff like that.
All right, so we have some questions like specifically relating to animation.
Okay, I will do my best.
All right, so like, what parts of IB's animations can we like directly attribute to like cutscenes, gameplay, combat, or just like in general? Like, what did you do?
Like I said, by the time we got to Infinity Blade, most of what I did was clean up the motion capture. So we would capture the characters, and as you can imagine, most of it was combat type animation. And then with the cutscenes, we'd capture all that. I would clean it up. There were some of them that I would do the actual animation on, but by the time we got through Infinity Blade, Scott was there and he did most of that. When he was there for Shadow Complex 2, I did about half, and he did about half. But by the time Infinity Blade came around, it was kind of different. It was different type of animation, as you know, and so he did most of the motion capture. He did the suit. He had some martial arts background. He'd done capoeira, which you can kind of see as you go through to Infinity Blade 3. I kept wanting to get some different martial artists in. He liked doing it himself, but I think the variety of the battle could have been a little better with some different guys in there. But yeah, I did mostly motion capture by the time Infinity Blade came around.
All right, so then how did you guys do the dragons?
The dragons?
Yeah.
When dragon, so that was let's see, was that in 2 or
that was in 3?
Was it 3? So
yeah.
we hired a new animator over from Disney for that. Brandon Beckstead. He came over, and I remember, because at that we were still a small company and we still have everybody get together for our meetings, and it was proposed, should we get Brandon? And Brandon had worked with Glyphics on Advent Rising, and then he was working over at Disney at that time. And I remember the meeting, and Donald proposed, should we bring Brandon in? And people were saying yes, and I don't know, do we need to make this, and can we afford it, and all this stuff. And Donald just said, well, look, if we want dragons, we're going to need to get Brandon. And so we all voted yes, and that's what happened.
That's cool. So one more thing about animation is, how did your position differ from Scott Stoddard's position of lead animator?
Well, so when Scott came in, so I was never lead animator. I just was the guy who did all the animation on Undertow and Shadow Complex, because that's somebody had to do it, and we were all wearing lots of hats at that time. But I was hired to run the motion capture system and to get the animations clean up, and then so when Scott came in, he was the lead animator. He made all the animation decisions, but it was a small company, and I'd been there for longer than a lot of guys, so I was pretty vocal of what I thought would look good, and I helped him to get it in. And I remember there were times when things needed to get done. instead of asking Scott if, what we should do on this animation, I just put it in, and I got kind of used to that. I don't know if you like that, but I didn't do a lot of that. Everything, and it was a good team. Everybody got along well, and it's great with a small team. It's amazing. I know that Epic was very pleased that with such a small team that we could get so much done. And as you get bigger and you get these departments and communication gets thicker and it's tough to things slow down. And I remember Tim Sweeney was really impressed. Epic had put one of these, I don't remember what they called it, like a Creative Friday every other month or something. Come up with, do whatever you want. We'll look at it and evaluate it and see if it can be something that can be good for to make in the future. And, it was more just of a morale kind of thing, because when you're working on the same project for, 18 hours a day for a long time, it gets down. So, but this was during the election between Obama and Romney, and we took some of the assets from Infinity Blade and we made a little game called Vote with Mitt Romney and Obama beating each other up with microphones. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, we've actually been playing it.
But, we did that in just like a week or less.
Wow.
Just took assets and put it together, and it was fun. And Tim was like, see what a small team can do. A small team can do agile stuff.
Did you guys make money off of Vote? Like, did you have good sales or?
Well, here's the problem with Vote. Like I said, Cliff always got to name the projects, right?
Uh-huh.
So with a name like Vote, nobody was able to find it. And we had the one that we'd come up with that we really liked was called Campaign, CAM-PAIN. Hey, right?
Yeah.
But somebody thought that would sound too violent, and people would make a big deal about it. And, so they kind of dumbed it down to Vote, and nobody found Vote. It was really tough. So I think if it had a different name, it might have done a little better.
And that's too bad, because I'll tell you right now, there's a competitive leaderboard community right now who are trying to get to like, yes, I'm not kidding. So I'd like to transition away from IB and Vote for now. The archivist, he knows, or he has some questions about Spyjinx and Battle Breakers and other properties.
Okay, I'll say what I can. I just do want to say I don't speak for Epic Games anymore, so I don't want this to get the official Epic stuff at all. I'm just a guy who used to work on some of their projects.
Yeah, no worries. We understand that there was I guess a kind of a tumultuous history there with Chair, is like after 2016 or so, as soon as Donald got promoted. But yeah, there isn't very much information about Spyjinx, considering the game was unfortunately canceled. But I've always kind of been curious about the whole project, to be honest, just given that there is a lack of information. Can you maybe talk about, I guess, anything you can about Spyjinx, kind of behind the scenes and what happened there?
Well, I think you've really hit on the reason Spyjinx didn't come out. When we started Spyjinx, Donald talked with the guys at Bad Robot and kind of wanted to do something with them, and they wanted to do a spy game. So we came up with the name Spyjinx, and we started to build that project. Then Donald got literally promoted out of Chair, and we didn't have him to lead that anymore. And so, Donald's a good friend. I don't want to build him up too much, but he's an amazing team leader and good at making games that people want to play, basically. And I just feel like without him, it just never. This is my personal opinion. So, but I feel like one of the goals at the time we started Spyjinx, a game called Clash of Clans was really selling like crazy. And part of the goal was to make something that was like Clash of Clans, which is, you've probably seen it. You look down and you've got all these, it's top down, and you look at teams of people who go in and maraud other things. I never played much of it. The trouble with that, good spying is a very individual thing. And if you want to make a good spy game, you put it up close, not far away. You're in your first person, and you're alone. You haven't got anyone helping you, because that's the nature of spying. And you always feel like your enemy's stronger than you, and you do things to get away with it. And that was my idea for a spy game. I actually sent a letter in, and Don was like, yeah, this is right, but he wasn't running the team at the time. And it just never got fun. I played a lot of Spyjinx, and it never got to the level that the other chair projects got to. I think Donald would have possibly made a difference in that.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's gameplay out there. The beta did happen, so you have gameplay of it. So
you have
a lot of fun. I personally have not, but I have seen a bit of gameplay that we have. I've talked to people who played during the beta for their experiences. I've gotten my hands on the game files, as a matter of fact, and I'm kind of sifting through those, and it's really cool seeing just how far the game got.
Yeah, well, it changed and changed and changed and changed, but it never got fun. There was one time we had a couple of guys who proposed, look, why don't we make a first-person camera? And, programming in a camera is not easy. But one of the guys did it, and it was a little janky, but you could see, now this would be fun. You get in close, and you don't know what's around the corner. And you're kind of scared about what's going to come up and how you're going to handle it. And do you have the right tools for it? But that never came about. So this is all my personal opinion. So other guys on the team might say something different.
So my understanding is that Spyjinx, as well as I think Infinity Blade, possibly Shadow Complex, were initially brainstormed up in around 2006. The Muster Brothers have talked about this massive brainstorming session that the team did to figure out what their next big hit was going to be around the time of Undertow. Do you recall how that brainstorming session went? Any ideas you contributed?
Well, we had a lot of different brainstorming sessions, and they were great. And once again, you can only do that with a certain size team. Once you get too big, then not everybody's voice can be heard. But I think the one they're referring to, I remember, and it was over several days, and a lot of great ideas came out. There were some other. I remember when we do brainstorming sessions, everybody would propose a game, not just what would go on in the game. Everybody would propose different games, and I proposed mine, and other people proposed theirs. We always chose what Donald wanted for some reason, I guess. But that's okay, because he did good stuff. But yeah, I can't quite remember the question, but there was a lot of games that came out. The brainstorming sessions for Undertow and Shadow Complex were not at the same time as the one for Infinity Blade. Like I said, Infinity Blade basically came out of being told to make a mobile game, and the Spyjinx came out later. And I think the reason we settled on Spyjinx is because of the connection with Bad Robot that we kind of had at that time. I kind of forgot the question.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious about those brainstorming sessions. They've talked about, I guess, that 2006 or so session as kind of being the focal point of quite a few games.
Yeah, and because we'd have these brainstorming sessions, and there we would present a lot of games. Everybody would present games, and there were some good and some bad, and everybody always wonders what would have they done if they'd have made my game, and we'll never know. But I think the biggest thing from the brainstorming sessions, if you can have a a small, agile, talented team, that's really fun. You can get a lot done in a week-long brainstorming session that a lot of companies would say that's a waste of time because you're just sitting there laughing and presenting ideas. But I think it was one of the best things we did. It was a really fun job, I'll tell you that. It was a fun job.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from the outside looking in, from Instagram and all the posts, it seemed like a really, really great team. I guess as kind of a twist on that, though, when Shadow Complex Remastered came out, the Shadow Complex Twitter account shared a bunch of, I guess, fun facts on Fridays that were kind of cool to read about. And this one here, I thought that was interesting. I kind of wanted to mention to you was that apparently Donald Mustard was accidentally punched or kicked in the face during motion capture 5 times. Any stories about that?
I think the worst one, I think we had a 2-person capture, and I think Bert was wearing the other suit. And, you're trying to capture combat, and people get accidentally punched. I don't remember 5 times, but I do remember he did get hit pretty hard once. I think it was Bert that hit him. Nobody was trying to hurt anybody. Yeah, it was part of it. You're talking about Shadow Complex there, because I don't remember him doing that for Infinity Blade.
Right. Yeah, that's what it kind of does here in this fun fact. Yeah.
Complex. Yeah, that was in Shadow Complex. The main guy that we had for doing the character in Shadow Complex was a guy, he did textures and other art, Jared Trulock. And he had done Muay Thai fighting. I just loved having him as a subject, because he walked. In my business, you watch how a lot of people can't really move. There's a lot of people you can't put anybody in a motion capture suit and have it come through. But he just the way he walked looked like a military guy, and so Jared was great.
All right, sorry to interrupt you guys, but Zoom gave us a 40-minute meeting, and we've only got about 40 seconds left. So if we want to continue on another, we could, or if we want to just wrap things up and just think.
Well, I don't know if I've got a whole lot of information. And once again, I just want to say this is just my recollections. I was just the MoCap guy there. There's a lot of other really great, talented guys on the teams that did a lot of different stuff that have some different perspectives. So
we'll be sure to reach out to them.
Okay.
No, I will. Yeah, absolutely.